Hello, I want to discuss the period of Reconstruction, which existed between 1865 and 1876. This is a period after the Civil War where approximately 4.4 million African Americans were living in the United States. Over 3.8 million of them had been former slaves. The United States government had to determine what to do with these people without resources such as land, cash, or other viable crops. The African American workforce at that time consisted mostly of agricultural workers and sharecroppers, domestic and food service workers, and laborers in the mining, freight, and forestry industry. The U.S. government established the Freedmen's Bureau, and other philanthropic societies were developed to help the African American population. Also, the African American population helped themselves through their own institutions, such as the church. The African American community, through the church, was able to pool their resources, meager resources they had, to buy land, to erect churches, and to build schools. Most of the African American community belonged to primarily the AME Zion, Baptist, or Episcopalian churches, religions. During this period, the U.S. government passed the following amendments: the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. These became the legal framework for enfranchising the black population. The 13th Amendment ended slavery except for individuals convicted of crimes. The 14th Amendment made all persons born in the United States automatic citizens. The 15th Amendment gave all men the right to vote. Use of these amendments were the legal framework, as I said, used to institute and guarantee the African population their rights during the Reconstruction period. One of the first things that happened was, since marriages between slaves or former enslaved people were not recognized by the federal government nor the state or local governments, was the tens of thousands of these couples would register their marriages with the Freedmen's Bureau, the Union Army, or with the local government. The Freedmen's Bureau also was used to locate family members who had been sold away prior to the war or during the war. So it was also a location for lost family members. The black communities also established, with their hard-won rights and what have you in their communities and limited resources they had, they established over 3,000 schools in the South. These schools became the foundation for public education. Prior to the Civil War, a number of southern states had no public education. And basically, with the enslaved population becoming free and getting political power at this time, they established, and controlling a lot of the Confederate southern states' governments, they instituted public education, also public work projects on basically building water and sewage infrastructure. With the establishment of schools, this required the need for trained teachers. So this caused the creation of the HBCUs, the historically black colleges and universities in the South. By 1869, there were more black educators in the South than there were white educators. There was almost 3,000 teachers working and teaching in the South by that year, 1869. There were 14 black medical and nursing schools created between 1865 and 1910, with at least over 385 accredited physicians. Due to the limited number of doctors, African American communities still depended on folk remedies and herbal medicines in some instances. In 1869, Howard University established the law school and had its first graduates in 1871. It would also be one of the first law schools to admit women who were also able to practice. In 1869, African American community elected delegates to the first convention of the Colored National Labor Union. This convention was to establish black men's rights in local and state areas for the workers' rights, basically to enfranchise and basically have a provision for workers' rights and what they were entitled to. This also was the enfranchisement of the black community in political office. By the mid-1870s, blacks were black men held over 2,000 positions in the South in the local and state governments. They held 16 congressional seats, U.S. congressional, and 3 U.S. senator seats. Some of these men were Hyman Revels, who was elected to the U.S. Senate twice from Mississippi, Congressman Robert Smalls from South Carolina, and Congressman Joshua Walls and Martin Delany, both one from Florida and the other from South Carolina. As I stated earlier, the period of Reconstruction ceased about 1876 due to a compromise between the Democrats Samuel Tilden and the Republican Rutherford Hayes. They were running for, they were contestants in the presidential election that year, and the compromise that was developed was that Rutherford Hayes would take the presidency, and all Union troops would be removed from the South. With the removal of the Union troops and no more interference by the North or Union, there was a rise in the Ku Klux Klan, the enactment of Jim Crow laws and black codes, and the suppression of black votes, thus thereby removing most blacks who had gained political positions from their positions as time went on. And this suppression continued until roughly about during the till the 1960s civil rights movement.